All right, so we're looking at design a report in Power BI desktop today. So this lab will take you approximately a couple of hours, maybe a little bit less than that. So we're going to sign into the lab. I've already clicked on the Start Lab icon, and I'm going to type in the password here, which is listed as on the right-hand side here, PA55W.RD. So we're going to go ahead and type that in. And press enter. It'll take us into our lab environment there. And the first thing we're going to do is adjust the window to size, and we can do that by clicking on here. Fit window to machine, we can go full screen. In this case, I'm not going to choose either one of those because I want to be able to move this around here. And as you know, we can open up or close our instructions to give us more space on the screen there. All right, so we've done that. So we're going to go forward into our lab instructions. So we're designing a report in Power BI desktop, right? So this is going to be a desktop lab. But there is a story here. And we're looking on the right-hand side, and it says in this lab, you'll create a 3-page report. So we're going to have 3 tabs, each with its own report. And then we're going to publish that once we've finished creating the report to Power BI, which is going to be the Power BI service. Then we're going to open and we'll interact with the report there. All right, so 2 main things we're doing. We're designing the report, and then we're going to configure visual fields and format properties. So we're going to change the way our report looks and how we can interact with it. Okay, so here we go. It says, get started. To complete this exercise, first open a web browser and enter the following URL to download the zip folder, right? That's my first step before I even get started. I'm going to go ahead and open up this Edge virtual browser here. It's actually inside the virtual machine. And then instead of typing the address here, I'm just going to click on the little T there, and it's going to type that in for me. And once it finishes typing in, I'll press enter, and it'll open up the zipped files. So I've got a folder here. I'm going to go ahead and open it up from the downloads folder. And then because I'm in the virtual machine, I'm just going to go ahead and extract it right here in the downloads folder. You'll notice it says downloads here. I'll just leave it as that default address. If it was on my own computer, I would probably select a different folder, right? And I had mentioned in our assignment page that creating a folder for the class is a good idea. All right, so I've got 3 files here. The instruction on the right-hand side tells me to open the 06 Starter Cells Analysis PBIX file. So here's my Starter Analysis PBIX file. So I'm going to go ahead and open that up. All right, so as that's opening up there, it's connecting to the Power BI product inside of the virtual machine. Let's read this little note here that says, you can dismiss the sign-in by selecting cancel. That's if it comes up. Close any other informational windows and select apply later if prompted to apply the changes. So in case you see something like that, you can go and cancel and apply later. We should be able to get into that. Okay, so I'm going to scroll down a bit here so we can start to read about what we're going to do. So it says in this exercise, you'll design the first report page. When we've completed the design, the page will look like the following. So we've got a little bit of a visual key, right? So this is going to give us a good idea of what the finished product should look like. So it looks like we've got a logo, we've got some slicers, on the right-hand side, some visuals. Okay, step number 1. It says in Power BI Desktop, to rename the page at the bottom left right, click Page 1, then rename the page as Overview. All right, so to give myself some real estate here, I'm going to go ahead and get rid of this collaborate and share little sign there. We don't need it right now. And it's asking me to open up, actually to rename the page 1 as Overview. So here's page 1. I'm going to go ahead and click on that. And when I do that, when I double click, it allows me to type in my name. This one's going to be called Overview. I type in the name and I press enter. Now I've got a new renamed page. Then it says to number 2, add an image on the Insert Ribbon tab from inside the Elements group, and then we're going to select image from there, right? And we've got a little picture here of what that looks like. So the ribbon is the Insert ribbon. So I'm going to go to the top here, right? We know that the top ones here are called ribbons, and then the group is the Elements group. So here's my little group here. It's a little a few settings that are grouped together in the Elements group. I've got my image button. So I'm going to go ahead and click on image, and it asks me, where do you want to get your file from? Well, we know that our file is inside of the downloads folder because we downloaded those files and we extracted those files in the downloads folder. If we had extracted them to another folder, we would go to that folder. Right now they're in downloads. We're going to go select that, click on open, and it says in the open window, navigate to see user student downloads, and we did do that there. We selected the AdventureWorks logo and we opened it. Okay. Now that we've got the logo on the page here, it says drag the image to position it at the top left corner and also drag the guide markers to resize it. So it's already at the top left corner. So I'm just going to take it a little bit and move it a little bit over to the left, right up against the grid line here. And I'll make it a tiny bit smaller, right? Just a tiny bit smaller there. So it looks more like this image that's in the instructions. Okay. Now yours doesn't have to be exactly this way. You can make it a little bit bigger if you wanted to, right? A little bit smaller, but it should take up the top left corner. Okay, so we've got an image, right? We've got a little logo there. To add a slicer, first deselect the image by clicking an empty area of the report page. Then we're going to select the slicer in the visualizations pane. All right, so as we're looking at this here, we're going to deselect the image because if you notice on the right-hand side, I don't see visualizations, right? There's no visualizations pane here. Why is that? Well, these panes have to do with the object that I'm clicked on right now, the object that is selected. So I'm going to go ahead and click off of that, and there we go. Now we see the visualizations page so that we can add a visualization to the rest of the page there. All right, so we're going to go ahead and go over to our slicer. And if you'll notice here in the instructions, you've got a little square around what the slicer looks like, right? So we're going to go over to the visualizations pane here. We've got lots of different visualizations. We're looking for the slicer, and it looks like this one here. If you put your mouse over it, the little screen tip there tells you this is the slicer. We're going to go ahead and click on the slicer there, and it brings up a slicer. Now remember that a slicer allows you to quite literally slice into one of the elements of your data, right? If it's date, you can do it by year. If it's a product, right, you can look at it by category. So it allows you to look at something more specifically. Okay, we put in our slicer number 7. It says in the data pane, drag the date year field, not the year level field of the hierarchy into the slicer field in visualizations pane. All right, so here's what we're talking about here. Here's our data pane. And on the right-hand side, we're looking for the date, right? So that's what this means, date. So I'm going to open up the date. And from in here, we're going to look for the year. So here's my year field, right? But it's warning you here not to put in the year from this fiscal hierarchy, right? So we're not looking at the hierarchy here. This is a hierarchy that we built in a previous lab. We're looking at the actual year here. All right, so it's asking us to drag that into the slicer field, right? I'm going to go over here, and here's my visualization pane. Here's the field for the currently selected slicer visualization. I'm going to go ahead and release my year there, and what you're going to see populate in our slicer here is the years, right? The years that are part of this data set. Okay, now that we've got our years here, we're going to go on to number 8. It says to convert the slicer from a list to a drop-down. All right, so I want to be able to select it from a drop-down list here. We're going to format this a little bit. So it tells you to navigate to visualizations, right? Here's our visualizations pane here. And we're going to go format visual. All right, so we're going to look for the format visual. Now you'll notice that if you're looking here, there's no format visuals. Well, the formatting is done in the second little icon here called format visual. I'm going to go ahead and click on that. We've got 2 different sets here, visual and general, right? 2 different offerings. I'm going to click on visual, and then I'm going to go down to my slicer settings because I'm going to change this, right, from the current checklist to a drop-down list. Okay, so from there, I'm going to go into my style, right? So here's a style. What kind of list do you want? What kind of slicer? We click on the drop-down list, and we want the drop-down. We're going to go ahead and click on that. Okay, so notice that right now it says all, but it has become a drop-down list that we can choose to select one of the years there. Okay, we're done with that slicer setting. We're going to go down to number 9. It tells you to resize and position the slicer so it sits beneath the image and is the same width as the image, right? Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to resize this, right? I'm just going to make it a little bit smaller. And I'm going to bring it right above my little logo here, right below it. Okay, I'm going to resize it to make it a little bit smaller here. The same width, right? So if you put your mouse over the image, you'll see the right hand edge of your image, and that's about right there. Done with that step. Okay, moving on to number 10. It says in the year slicer, open the drop-down list and select future, right? Future year 2020, fiscal year 2020, and then collapse the drop-down list. All right, so we're going to do that now. We're going to choose the fiscal year 2020, and then we'll collapse the drop-down list by clicking on the little arrow to make it go back there, right? So we can expand and collapse using the little arrow there. Okay, then we're going to go down into number 11. Deselect the slicer by clicking an empty area of the report page. So we know we're going to click away from here because now we're going to want to see the fields here that don't just apply to our little slicer. All right, so we went ahead and clicked away from there. Number 12, it says create a second slicer. All right, so this slicer was for the year, but now we're going to create a second slicer, right? A way to get directly to a piece of that data by creating a region slicer. All right, so it tells us to base this slicer on the region field, right? Not the region level of the hierarchy, which means not the one in the folder. And we'll look at that right now. Now, remember how we did it the first time, right? So this is just asking us to create the second slicer, but it's not telling us how to do that. If you don't remember how to create the slicer, no problem. You just did that here in the previous steps, right? So we'll go back to where we started adding the slicer here, where we created or selected the slicer visualization here. So I'm going to go ahead and choose my slicer, right? And if you're not sure which one it is, put your mouse over it. The screen tip will tell you. We're going to take that and we're going to drag it here. Actually, we're just going to click on it. And it's going to give us another little slicer that we can put right underneath our year. All right, but now we've got to populate that field, right? So we are making a slicer for, if you look at number 12 here, the region. Okay, so we're looking at region here. It's telling us that it's in this region here, and the field we're specifically looking at is called region as well. So I want you to notice that in this regions hierarchy, we also have region, but we're not looking at that one, right? We did that so that we could drill down. We're going to click on the region here, and we're going to drag it into our fields, so into our data fields. And you'll notice that all of the regions that are listed in that field are now listed here as well, right? So we've created a way to get to one specific region versus seeing all of the data for all the regions. Okay, we created our region, right? Our slicer region. We're going on to number 13. It says leave the slicer as a list. So we're not going to make this one a drop-down list. We want to be able to see all the different regions. So I'm going to expand this little slicer here so that I can see all the regions here because it is indeed not a drop-down, right? We want to be able to select from the list. Okay, and then it says resize and position the slicer beneath the year slicer. Okay, we've got it, right? So we're looking like, it's looking like this here in the visual and also on our page. Number 14, deselect the slicer by clicking an empty area of the report page. I'm going to go ahead and do that now. I'm going to deselect it. And then it says number 15. To add a chart to the page in the visualizations pane, right? So now we're going to go back to the visualizations pane, right? We had to deselect the slicer to get back to all of our offerings visualizations here. And then it says from here to select the line and stacked column chart, right? So we're looking at a stacked column and a line. So we're looking for more than one plot data set here. All right, so we're looking here at our, right there, line and stacked column chart. So you don't have to memorize where these are. If you're not sure, just put your mouse over it, right? Hover right over it, and it'll tell you which one it is. I'm going to go ahead and click on that, and it's going to put that visualization, right, this type of chart, onto my page. Okay, moving on. Number 16. It says resize and position the visual so it sits to the right of the logo and so it fills the width of the report page. All right, so it's already sitting to the right of the logo. Here's my right? But now I want it to fill the rest of this page. So I'm going to go ahead and use the sizing handle to make it go all the way to the right, so that my grid line touches the right side of my chart there. Okay, that looks about right. And then it tells me that I'm going to now include fields for this particular chart. Okay, number 17 is what tells me which fields to include. Number 17, drag and drop the following fields into the visual. So I'm going to go into my date. Here's my date, right? And from there, I'm going to choose month. So here's my month. I'm going to click on it, and then I'll just bring it on down, and it's telling me to drop it into the visual. So we're going to include our fields. Here's my x-axis. That's the first one. Okay, and then my cells field, I'm going to open up my cells. I'm going to put it into my cells field, right? So again, this is more than one data set. Okay, great. But I also need a line axis, right? So it says in the visual fields pane, located beneath the visuals pane, notice that the fields are assigned to the x-axis and column y-axis well areas. Okay, and we've got that. And it says by dragging fields into a visual, they'll be added to default well areas. For precision, you can drag fields directly into the wells areas as you'll do next. All right. So I've got my x-axis month, and I've got my sum of cells. Moving forward here, it's telling me from the data pane, drag the sales profit margin field into the line y-axis. So essentially, we've got this data set here, right? This is giving us one story, but we also want a different story, and that's going to be our line axis, and that's going to come from the profit margin field. So I'm going to go ahead and open up my profit as soon as I find it here. Data pane, sales, and no wonder I couldn't find it here. From the data pane, drag the sales, profit margin, sales, and profit margin. There we go. And we're going to put that one into our line y-axis. Oops. Let's bring it on back. No problem. I just dragged it back to where I originally got it from so that I can now better move it into here. Now, if you have this problem of not being able to drag things, try resizing your window. Sometimes that helps a little bit, or you can even scroll a little bit, right, to make it just a little bit easier for you to find. Okay, now I see the two sets here that I'm viewing here in my visual, right? More than one story is being described here. Okay, got number 19, looking at number 20. It says, notice that the visual only has 11 months. Well, let's see here, July all the way through May. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Oh, 11. We're missing a month, right? A year usually has a month. Well, what could have happened here? It says the last month of the year, 2020 June, doesn't have any cells, right? So it's not listed here. It doesn't have any cells yet. By default, the visual has eliminated months with blank cells. And sometimes that's a good thing, right? You don't want to include something that has blank cells. But right now we're going to configure the visual to show all of the months, all 12 months. Okay, number 21. In the visual fields pane, in the x-axis, right? So here's my visual fields here, and I've got my x-axis here. For the month field, we're going to select the drop-down arrow. So the drop-down arrow they're talking about is the one right here, right next to the X. So not the X, but the drop-down. And then we're going to click on Show Items with No Data. So right now it happens to be June, right? But we want to show a complete year. So we're going to go ahead and click on the Show Items with No Data. And when we do that, it gives us an empty slot for June, right? So it's not showing that there were any cells yet. And we can talk about that in this visual if we're making a presentation. We want to make sure that we show the completed 12 months here. And again, you can indeed choose to not show the empty blanks, right? Or to show them depending on what your end users are needing to see. Okay, done with that one. Now we're going to go to number 22. It tells you to deselect the chart by clicking an empty area of the report page. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and deselect the chart here. And then it says in number 23. To add a chart to the page in the visualizations pane, select the stacked column chart visual type. All right, so I'm going to look for my stacked column chart, right? So you're looking for going up and down, a column chart, right? Things that are stacked on top of each other. And I'm going to put my mouse right over this, and it looks like the second one there is a stacked column chart. Now, please notice that I did indeed click away from this chart, right? If I was still clicked on that and I chose a stacked column chart, it would replace what I currently have on the screen, and I don't want that. So I'm going to deselect it, and then I'll put in my stacked column chart, and it puts it right underneath the existing chart. Okay. And then it tells me to resize and position the visual so it sits beneath the column line chart, and so it fills half the width of the chart above. Right, so this is a pretty wide chart, right? So we're just going to make this half as long as the one right above it. So I'm going to take the right sizing handle and I'll make it about half there. Okay, and again, this doesn't have to be perfect, but it does have to be visually somewhat congruous. Okay, so number 25. Now we're going to fill in our fields for this chart. It tells us to add the following fields to the visual wells or the visual areas. Okay, I've got my x-axis, I've got my y-axis, and I've got the legend that describes what type of data is being displayed here. So my x-axis is my region. Okay, here's my region, and I'm going to go into country. All right, so notice that country, the field type has already been set to region, right? So this is going to be, it's going to work well for a map. But right now, we're just going to pull it into this x-axis. I'm going to go ahead and select that there. It's going to start pulling in the data. The y-axis is going to be from sales. So I'm looking for my sales query. Here it is. And I'm going to look for sales. There's my sales. I'll put it into the y-axis. And the last thing that I want to put in here is my legend, right? What are we comparing here? We're looking at product and category. So I'm going to open up my product query and select my category from there so that I can include that. And I did it again. Oops, there it is. Oh, okay. I'm going to take my advice and I'm going to scroll up a little bit here. And now I can take my product category and more easily just kind of drag it in there. Okay. And there's my stacked column chart, right? We can see each one of these categories being stacked on top of the other, right? Each with a different color. Okay, so it looks like it's sum of sales by country and category, right? And you'll see that here, we did indeed choose sum of sales by country and category. All right, so I've got these visuals here. So at the top, I'm looking at sales and profit by month. At the bottom, I'm looking at sales by country and category. On the left-hand side, I have two different slicers that allow me to get to a specific part of this data set, but I'm not done. I've got one more thing that I want to add on to here. And in this next set of steps, we're going to be adding a stacked bar chart. Okay, so in 26, it tells me to deselect. Got it. I deselected, right? And I don't want to replace this. I want to add a new one. So I deselected the chart, and now I'm going to add a chart to the page in the visualizations pane called stacked bar chart. Columns go up and down, bars go left and right. So I'm looking here right next to my stacked column chart, but that's a clustered bar chart, right? That's not what I want. I want my, as soon as I find it here, the first one listed is the stacked bar chart. All right, I'm going to go ahead and click on there and notice there's only one piece here on the page that can really receive this chart, and that's exactly where it lands. Okay, got it. Number 28, it says to resize and position the visual so it fills the remaining report page space. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and just make this a little bit taller. I'll do the same thing for this one here, a little bit taller. All right, so they're both the same size so that it's visually a little bit easier to see and differentiate, but I am going to make this a tiny bit, move it to the right a little bit so it's not so stacked on top of my left column chart. Okay, number 29. It's telling me to add the following fields to the visual wells. All right, so these areas here that I'm adding are the y-axis from product category and x-axis from sales quantity, right? So we're looking here at the y-axis and the x-axis. Starting off with product, we're going to go into our category and we're going to bring it into our y-axis. Then we're going to go into our x-axis. We're going to go into sales. So I'm going to scroll down a little bit here. I'm going to find quantity, and I'll put that into my y-axis. Okay, so I've got my x-axis and y-axis here, right? So we're looking at category, and we're looking at the sales of these categories, which are clothing, bikes, components, accessories. Okay, but now we're going to format this a little bit here. So it tells us to format the visual by opening the format pane. All right, so I need to go into my formatting icon here to see all of the ways I can format this specific chart here. And it's telling me here to, once I have clicked on the visualizations format icon, to expand the bars and then the colors group, and then set the default color property to a suitable color to complement the column line chart. So here's our column line chart, right? So at this point, you could change it to whatever color you think goes well here, a complementary color. Okay, let's try it. We're going to go over to our bars, right? So here is our bars option. And I'm going to scroll down so that I can see more of this here. Okay, here's my bars option. And I'm going to go into my colors group. Here's my colors group, right? And then I'm going to set the default color to a suitable color to complement the column and line chart. Well, it's already the same color as these columns here. So the other color that I can think of as a complementary color could be a darker blue, right? Like the line chart. That also happens to complement this chart that we have on the left as well. Okay, so I've done that, and I'm looking at my chart and I'm realizing, okay, well, this looks good, but there's very little data here, right? Let's look at what we can do with that. If we're looking at our step number 32, it tells us to set the data labels property to on. So we're going to scroll down a little bit here, and we're looking for our data labels property. So I scrolled down a little bit and I found it. And right now it is not currently set to be on. So we're going to click on the on button, and you'll notice that you get these little data labels just like you would in Excel that shows you the amount, right? So we've got here on our axis these grid amounts, but now it tells us specific amounts here at the end of our bar chart, which does make this data a little easier to read, and that's the point of this. All right, so we've gone through steps 1 through 33. In the next steps, you're going to be designing a second page, right? Click on the next video to watch that.